Hi, you're right. It's Mr. Comans. I just thought I'd do a little video for you about the Shakespeare work that we're doing in term three. First of all, like I know these lockdown situations and remote learning and all of that. It's a difficult situation. It's not easy for everyone to do the work and all of that. So I'm very understanding of that, and I know the whole school's very understanding of that as well. And there's been some work up on the Google Classroom, some questions, some videos, some things to read and all of that. But what I thought I'd do today is just do a short video, less than 10 minutes, just giving a bit of a introduction to the Shakespeare topic that we're doing, and then you can just watch the video. You don't have to make any notes, you don't have to do anything, and at least you can get some good information that way. Okay, so what we're doing at the moment is an introduction to Shakespeare. Okay, Shakespeare, William Shakespeare, was born about 450 years ago, 460 years ago, something like that, in England. And he's pretty much considered the best and most famous of all the writers in the history of the English language. And what he wrote mostly was plays, and he wrote about 40 plays. And some of the most famous plays are Romeo and Juliet, for example, and Macbeth. Some other famous ones are called Hamlet and King Lear and Othello. And he wrote a lot of plays about kings and queens in English history, like King Henry IV and King Richard III and all of these. And what a play is, well, it was kind of like the old-time equivalent of watching a movie, really, because hundreds of years before video cameras and sound equipment and anything like that was invented, what people could do for entertainment is they go to the playhouse. And the one that Shakespeare worked for was called the Globe Theatre in London, in England, near the Thames River in London. And they could see people perform a play, which is sort of like a long story about something, just like a movie is. And there's similarities between a play and a movie, but there's lots of differences as well. In a movie, if an actor makes a mistake, they just say cut and then they refilm it, and you would never know, and they could do that 30 times before they get it right. But if the actors make a mistake in the play, well, they just have to keep going because it's watching a live performance. And sometimes this happens and they just maybe forget their line a little bit, or they do something a bit wrong, but they just have to keep going anyway. So Shakespeare wrote his plays about wars, about romances, about funny situations, about people having misunderstandings and arguments with each other, about love, about hate, and about battles and all these things. And they were very interesting stories which the audience 450 years ago, something like that, or more like 400 years ago, that they really enjoyed it because it was like the popular entertainment of the day, and it was really, really good. And rich people could go in and buy an expensive ticket and sit down and watch the show. People with less money could buy a cheaper ticket and they might have to stand up and watch the show, and people would bring around snacks to eat. Snack food back then was very different to snack food now. So one thing they liked to have a snack when they were watching the play was eels, because the River Thames in London was full of eels. And so they would catch eels and sort of cook them in a jelly, and then the jelly and the eels would be warm, or they might even be cold, and that was like eaten with a toothpick or something like that for a snack. And people would drink beer and other things there, and they might get a bit rowdy sometimes and all of this, but they would mainly be there to watch the show. So it's sort of like the old-time equivalent of going to the movies. Now, the play would go from anywhere between it could be 2 hours long up to almost 4 hours long. Shakespeare's longest play is called Hamlet, and a performance of Hamlet goes for about 4 hours. Then there's some shorter plays. which might be, and sometimes the shorter plays were like the funny ones, and they might be only 2 to 2.5 hours. So as I said, Shakespeare wrote about 40 of these plays, and they are divided into 3 categories. So there were the funny ones, which are called the comedies. There are the sort of the serious and sad ones where bad things happen to people and a lot of people die usually, and they are called the tragedies. And then the third category is called the histories, and they were mainly about the different kings and queens of England, but also kings and queens from other countries as well. Now, the first one I'm going to talk about, the first play I'm going to talk about is Macbeth, and Macbeth is one of the tragedies. The basic story of Macbeth is that there's this young sort of soldier, powerful, cool guy called Macbeth. This all takes place in Scotland, so they've all got names that start with Mac, like Macbeth and all of these. And there's some wars going on in Scotland. Macbeth is successful in a war, and he sort of gets a promotion. And then these witches appear. And the witches are supernatural. They can predict the future. And there's 3 witches. And they sort of appear before Macbeth, and they say to Macbeth, and also to Macbeth's friend, who's called Banquo, the witches basically predict that Macbeth will become the King of Scotland. The problem is that there's already a King of Scotland, and his name's Duncan. So Macbeth goes home and he tells his wife, and her name is just Lady Macbeth. He tells Lady Macbeth what the witches said, and Lady Macbeth says, well, there's an easy solution here. All we've got to do is kill King Duncan, the current king, and then you can be king. And she really wants that because it would make her very powerful, because she would then be the queen. Macbeth thinks this is the wrong thing to do, but his wife, Lady Macbeth, talks him into it. They conspire together to kill King Duncan when he is sleeping in their house, in their castle actually. But after that, things start to go very bad for Macbeth. Eventually people get suspicious of him. His wife starts to go crazy because she feels so much guilt about being the person whose idea it was to kill King Duncan. And then some of the other Scottish dudes, they start to create an army, and they fight against Macbeth, and eventually Macbeth is killed. That's the basic story of Macbeth. Now, one of the things I put on the Google Classroom is a video to watch, which is a YouTube video, which shows some different ways that the Macbeth story has been turned into some modern movies. Because this is something which has happened with Shakespeare a lot. They take some of his stories like Macbeth and they turn it into a modern movie. There's a very famous film version of Romeo and Juliet, which has got Leonardo DiCaprio in it. So that's an example of how that happens. So you need to watch that video on YouTube. And it has the start of 5 different movies, and the start of the different movies shows how the witches that I talked about, how they are introduced and how they are shown. They can make the witches old, they can make the witches young, they can make the witches creepy in different ways, and they can put the location of where the witches are in all sorts of different ways as well, such as in a graveyard or in the middle of a field or on a beach. Okay, and there's a few questions there to answer as well, and the questions are mainly like, what is your opinion about the better ones and why it's better and all of that. Okay, I'll do a few more of these videos later on, just giving some information about different things about Shakespeare. All right, I hope everyone who watches this video is going okay. I really wish I was I really wish we were all at school doing English and doing school properly, and hopefully we will be soon. Okay, get in touch with me on the Google Classroom if I can help you in any way. Okay, take care of yourselves. I'll see you later. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.